good evening, and welcome to my lair. I am Dr. Zelif Supernova, and I am here to assemble the finest academic minds around Sydney to pry into their formal knowledge and work out my new genius plan to take over the world. This evening, we have the diabolical Andrew Johnston from the Creativity and Cognition Studios right here at UTS. We'll be talking about interactive dance and machine cognition. We'll move straight on to that right now after these short subliminal messages. Welcome back from the break. Our first guest today is Dr. Andrew Johnston from the Creativity and Cognition Studios here at UTS. Hi, welcome to the show, Andrew.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Please take a seat.
Thanks.
Now we're going to be talking about some interactive dance works today, and I wanted to get a few of your opinions because people might not realise how evil, in fact, interactive dance can be. So the first thing that we want to talk about today is this clip that we have of yours from the internet. So we'll just cut across to that now. Alright, excellent. Now that we've all seen the clip, we can talk about a couple of interesting questions that emerge about agency of the human when they're engaging in an impromptu performance essentially with a computer. Now, have you looked at this topic and which areas in which perhaps agency shifts between the two?
Yeah, for sure. That's what most interests me actually. So I'm really interested in a kind of the performers having a conversation with the computer system, and I'm not interested in the computer dominating everything. I mean, there's a lot of scope for evil there, which I totally respect, but I'm not interested personally in the computer dominating the conversation. I want the performers and the computer to kind of be in a dialogue where the computer might do things that take the performer in a different direction to what they're anticipating, and that the computer basically acts as a stimulus to improvisation.
Yeah, excellent. You wrote about a change in the way that impromptu is engaged with, where previously perhaps dancers used touch to relate to another dancer in the improvisation process. Now you've said that you're not particularly interested in how much the computer is dominating that process, but you must accept that this is a new engagement between people and machines.
Yeah, it is a new kind of engagement, I think, yeah. And performers are often worried, like a lot of the dancers we've worked with, they spend years, working on their technique and their physical ability to do amazing things with their body to kind of express things. And they are concerned that the computer is going to come in and kind of dominate all that, and that they'll be kind of moving around in front of a ginormous projection, and everyone will be watching the projection and not appreciating the craft, or not really connecting with it the same way they would with normal dance. So it's one thing we try and do as designers and as performers ourselves, is to try and really kind of reassure performers that that's not what we're interested in, and build systems that interesting to the performer and that they can really kind of feel a connection with in a similar way that they might feel a connection with another dancer.
And how far do you go into investigating human cognition to find that boundary?
We're not so interested in cognition as such, despite the name of our research group. We're not so interested in the cognitive processes that are going on, but all our research is about building these interactive systems, using them in performance, and then afterwards we interview performers about what the experience was like and which aspects of the system kind of maybe helped them engage and encouraged them to engage, and which aspects didn't. And then we kind of build theories about, okay, well, what's a good design for doing this kind of thing, and what's a bad design? What are the things that lead us in nice directions, and what are the things that lead us in evil directions? That might be for later work, but yeah, that's how we go about it. So it's not so much focused on what's going on in their brains, but just kind of conversations with them, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. You also mentioned in your paper that in the rehearsal space there was a smaller projection, and the dancers emoted with that a lot better than they did when it went full scale. What kind of investigation have you done into optimizing the medium for best interactivity with a human?
Yeah, well, that's ongoing work. We're always trying to make it better and explore new directions. I don't know if we can ever optimize it as such, but you can find different techniques that work and then really kind of explore those. But the scale was definitely a strong theme that came out of the interviews for that performance that you're talking about. That when we were working initially, we just had very small scale projections that were more or less body sized, and the dancers would move and that would sort of trigger the projections and so on. And they said that they felt quite a strong connection with that, and they really connected with that. But when we scaled up the projections to be kind of like, I don't know, 20 metres wide and 10 metres high, even with exactly the same kind of behaviour going on, all of a sudden the whole interaction felt quite different and no longer so personal and so directly interactive. So I guess that's just something we have to be aware of, that when you're scaling things up, it doesn't stay exactly the same but just look bigger. It really changes the interaction in quite a fundamental way. It's probably kind of obvious, but yeah. But
well,
it was something we hadn't thought about so much before.
Yeah, and the ramifications are deeper, I think, than you would assume. It's something as simple as size, changing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to come back after the break with a section we here like to call Lizard Watch.
$199.95. And on this handsome
program, we were able to pick up
the deluxe console.
Developments which deal with the fact
of American life when the
Welcome back, everybody. We're returning with Dr. Andrew Johnston. We're going to be now investigating the high levels of corruption and dark deeds in the arts industry here in Australia. My first question for you actually relates to the CIA and Jackson Pollock. Now, there was a case in the 50s and the 60s where the CIA was funneling large amounts of money into modern art, and it turned out after the case that it was a distraction, funding commercial artistic bodies to create a conversation about modernism that comes from capitalism as opposed to the art that's coming out of Russia. Do we see this kind of manipulation in the way that grants are possibly handed out, for example?
I wish. I mean, if they were giving me large amounts of money, then I'd be very, very happy with that. But it's interesting. Personally, I haven't experienced that side of things, that level of evilness. But it's interesting how scared, in a way, governments are of artists. I've noticed just recently I was on a selection panel for to choose artists from Europe that were going to come over to Australia and do a residency here for a couple of months. And one of the artists from Europe was proposing to do something which was exploring asylum seekers. And it's interesting the degree to which, in a way, everyone on the panel was kind of self-censoring, because I think that artist had been selected from a pool, and that artist and the artwork that the artist was proposing to do had been chosen to be probably the best in that pool. But everyone was concerned about what impact was this going to have on the university that was going to be hosting the artist. We need to get permission from vice chancellors and things like this to host this artist. And so, yeah, I think I find it personally quite interesting how even if government is not interested in being involved and isn't directly involved and directly affecting funding, how we perceive that they might, and then that makes us censor ourselves in a sense.
Yes,
Sort of doesn't make any sense at all.
Oh, it's like a pseudo-panopticon. It makes sense to me anyway. And while we're on the topic of asylum seekers, I wanted to know, particularly because the recent Sydney Biennale sort of issue around sponsorship coming from Transfield in particular. Now, do you see corporations coming in, whether it's trying to sponsor something at the university level or in the private sector for the arts, trying to arts wash their brand by sponsoring or engaging in philanthropy or something like this?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
No, I
No.
haven't seen it myself, no.
And have you had, is this an experience that one could say does happen broadly? Is there a sense that the philanthropy of larger corporations is not only to boost their cultural capital, but rather maybe an ethical capital?
I definitely see the potential for it. Yeah, I just haven't experienced it myself. The whole Transfield thing was really interesting, and it was very interesting again to see how scared the government was of a bunch of artists in a way. That they straight away all started to leap onto the TV and just try and explain how the artists were having hissy fits, and making sure that the conversation wasn't about should Transfield be doing these things, be running these asylums, detention centres and things like that. So they straight away kind of tried to steer the conversation towards the artist and portraying them as being kind of prima donnas and refusing perfectly good money that was there on offer, and away from any other conversation that might have been more uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you so much for your time here today, Andrew. Do you have anything coming up that our audience might be interested in checking out?
You caught me by surprise there. We're hoping to do some exhibitions at the ABC shortly, and we have a number of performances coming up at the New Interfaces for Musical Expression conference, which also has a large arts festival associated with it in London. That's coming up in June.
Excellent. Well, as information comes out about that, we'll put some links in the About section to this video, and we'll be able to view those as we get the information. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and hopefully we'll see you around.
Well, what a fantastic episode that was. Thank you so much for joining me in this pit of despair. Next week, we'll be focusing on the theme complicit, and we'll be talking to Dr. Chris Cheshire. So stay tuned.